This video is brought to you by RV 360 Solutions, where we're bringing the RV industry full circle by providing inspections, consulting, and training. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the refrigerator in my Grand Design Reflection 303 RLS. So it came stock with the 16 cubic foot 12 volt Furrion refrigerator. We're going to try and get this Furrion 16 cubic foot 12 volt refrigerator out of my Grand Design Reflection 303 RLS. So as you can see, I was able to pull it out of that tight little compartment, and what I did is I have two of these little furniture dollies that I slid it up on top of, and you can see that the refrigerator just clears sitting on top of those dollies. If it weren't on those dollies, I think I would have had to pull the doors off of it, but because it's sitting up on the dollies, I had enough clearance to get it out, and I was able to do some troubleshooting. Found out that the refrigerator is indeed bad. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the two doors off, because there's just no way that it's going to fit out that entrance door without pulling the doors off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back. So to get these doors off, so this is the refrigerator side door. You take off these two plastic covers, and you have the switch right here. So once you take the two screws out, then you can take this guy off, unplug this, and then you can see that it's just a matter of taking these four screws out. This hinge bracket lifts up, and then the door will come off. Now that I got these four screws out of here, this bracket's just going to lift up, and you can see that there's a little slot where I can pull this wire out, and now basically my door sits loose, and the magnetic seal will hold it in place. So all the wires disconnected, this door is ready to come off. On the freezer door side, you'll notice that there is no wire going down through here like there was on the refrigerator. So this wire actually just went down to the control panel. Actually, sorry, this wire went down to the control panel that's on the door. This went to the switch. So on this side we have just this one that went to that switch. So we'll do the same thing. Take these four screws out, lift the bracket off, and then this door will come off. Now that I have the doors off, I can come around, and you can see I have a little bit more room now. So I can roll this thing out and just get by the countertop and get back to these wires. So we have our positive and negative 12 volt lines coming in. Just a couple of wire nuts, and I'll disconnect those, and then we'll roll this thing out a little bit farther. Okay, so got the refrigerator out and in my garage, and when I talked to Furrion, they told me that there are no user serviceable parts on this thing, but this panel actually sits in here, and then there's another cover that goes over the coils. I did figure out how to get this panel off, and I'll show you the trick to that here in a little bit, but I want to take this panel apart, and so supposedly there's some kind of diverter plate in here that, so this is in the freezer section. So when that fan's blowing, and I'll show you how to test it, but you're going to get air out of these two ducts right here. But you can also see this goes into the refrigerator section. So when I first talked to Furrion, they said that there's a diverter plate in here that allows air to go to the refrigerator or to the freezer or to both. And that probably the issue that I was having is that diverter plate getting stuck. So I'm going to go ahead, try to peel back this foam. Not having much luck, so I'm just going to cut this and open this up to see what's inside of here. So I'll get that open and then we'll get back together. Alright, so I was able to get this piece separated, and there's just a bunch of little plastic tabs that you just kind of have to pull that piece out. So talking to Furrion, their technician told me that there's a diverter plate. Well, all I found in here was a fan. So kind of the fan sits right here, and the airflow into the refrigerator goes that direction. And then all of these ports are going to blow cold air into the freezer. So let's go back over here and look real quick. So we have our coils, which are going to get cold, and that airflow is going to come in, go over the coils, and then either come back out into the freezer or go through this hole right here, which is going to go into the refrigerator. So now I'm going to see if I can get this plastic cover off, because I'm still thinking there's some kind of way to keep the air or change the amount of air that's going into that refrigerator. So let me see if I can get that off and we'll come back. Alright, so I figured out how to get this cover off, and it's actually pretty simple. So this must be a temperature sensor of some kind. Let me get this unplugged. And you can see this little latch. So there's a plastic piece that sits up underneath this. So what you have to do is push that piece down after you get this unlatched. So let's see what we have in here. Alright, let me unplug this and take this guy apart, and I'll be back. Alright, so got this piece out of the refrigerator, and again, this little area right here, this ductwork, is where, so this piece sits in the freezer section, and then this piece sits like that in the refrigerator section. So any air that's coming from this fan is either going to go through these vents, and you'll feel the air blowing out into the freezer section, or it's going to come through and into the refrigerator section here. So this had some tape on it, close it all up. You can see the tape right there. So I took the tape off and I split this open. Inside, I finally found my little diverter, kind of like a gate. So it appears, I'm going to pull this out and take it apart, but it looks like there's just a motor in here that flips this closed, so you can have cold air blowing into the freezer. Of course, the freezer is going to get much colder than the refrigerator, and so by opening and closing this gate, you can control how much cold air actually blows into the refrigerator. So let me pull this apart and we'll see what's inside of it. Alright, so got this thing apart, and you can see there's this little electric motor, some gears. Trying to do this without these gears all falling out. There is that gate that is going to open and close, and it's obviously driven by that motor. So if you look down in here, you can also see what look to be heating coils. So my guess is that keeps this thing from freezing in the open or closed position and kind of keeps it defrosted. So again, pretty simple, as long as that motor works and the gears and everything are good. So I'm going to try and put this all back together. Okay, so I finally got all of these gears and the motor and everything back. Yeah, certainly not something you want to try at home. Pretty complicated device, actually. I have the refrigerator at least partially back together. So on the refrigerator side, this is where that little door is that controls how much air comes into the refrigerator side. And then that would be the thermostat. So I'm just going to leave this hanging here, and I put some tape over the two switches so you can see my LED lights are off, which means it thinks the doors are closed. And then on the freezer side, the fan I put back in there, and I'm leaving the coils exposed for right now. So I don't expect this to get cold, because that cold air isn't going to have a way to actually travel up into there. But what I want to see is when this fan comes on, I'll fill it on the freezer side, and then I want to see if I feel it on the refrigerator side. I connected a battery directly to this thing, and we're going to give it a second to cycle on. I don't hear the compressor running yet, and I don't feel anything on that fan. So I'm gonna leave this here just like this, and I'm gonna pull that cover off where the compressor is, and we'll see how this thing does. Okay, so I got this cover off, and here's the compressor, and I can actually feel that the compressor is running right now. And you can see there is a drain pan in the bottom of this thing. We have our coils here. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this back off, and I'm gonna go back around inside the freezer, and I want to see if that fan came on yet. Alright, so back around on the freezer side. So you can see that we're starting to get some frost on the coils. So the compressor is definitely running. I don't have anything coming from this fan yet. So it could very well be that until I put that cover back on and we get cold air, I'm not sure what causes that fan to come on, but I'm gonna go get my clamp on ammeter, see what kind of draw we have, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and put this cover back on. Got my ammeter on the positive cable, showing 5.75 amps. And again, I did verify that the compressor is running. I have my 12 volt battery up here. I'm gonna go ahead and plug my battery charger into it just to make sure we don't drain that battery. Okay, so this thing's been running for about 10 minutes now. I went ahead and put it in the power fridge and power freezer, so 32 and minus 10. You can see I put my battery charger on there, 12 volt battery connected, and I put some thermometers in here. I took the tape off these doors just because I wanted to be able to know if it was open and closed. So now when I cheat the freezer door, I can feel the fan blowing. So there's cold air coming through that vent. and cold air coming through that vent, which means the freezer section is definitely cooling, and I can feel that those coils down at the bottom are cold. So I'm going to give it about 5 minutes, and I would expect to see the temperature drop significantly in the freezer. So let's go over to the refrigerator, and I'm going to cheat the door. So right now there's no air coming through that little door on the refrigerator side. So again, I'll give it about 5 minutes, and we'll check the temperature on the freezer and the refrigerator. I would expect the freezer side to go down, but not the refrigerator side. So I also wanted to check my amperage draw again, now that that fan is on. So with the compressor running and the fan on, we're at just about 8 amps, which the last couple of times that I've checked the draw on this thing, that's about right. So again, compressor's still running, hasn't turned off at all. Okay, so I did a hard restart, and I've got the freezer door open, but I'm cheating the switch, and I can feel the fan blowing. So we have cold air going through that vent, and you can see the freezer is cooling off. So I'm gonna check on the refrigerator side. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this piece out. And you can see that that door is closed in there. So when I cheat the door on the refrigerator side, give it just a second, and we'll see if I can feel some air blowing through there. Okay, so now I can feel air blowing from that fan on the freezer side. And again, the little gate that controls that is closed. So at this point there won't be any cold air. You can see that gate is closed. So when I put this back in, we're still not going to get any cold air on the refrigerator side, and you can see the refrigerator really hasn't cooled off. Alright, so I'm going to close the door again, and I'll come back in about 15 minutes. Alright, so it's been another 15 minutes or so. Still, refrigerator set at 32, freezer set at -10. So let's just check and see. So we're at about 10 degrees on the freezer side. I'm going to go ahead and cheat this switch again. And so that fan is back on right now, and definitely cooling on the freezer side. So let's go over to the refrigerator side, and let me cheat this switch, and you can see we're still 67, 68 degrees. Really not any cooling going on, and definitely no airflow. So I'm going to pull this back out. And you can see that door is still closed. So I'm going to cheat this switch again. And we'll see how long it takes for that fan to come back on. Alright, so you can feel air coming from the freezer side. And again, that door is closed, so none of that cold air is going to get into the refrigerator. when this is sitting in place. So at this point, we're still cooling the freezer section, but there's no cooling, no meaningful cooling going on the refrigerator side. Let me just verify. Ammeter shows a little over 6 amps, and compressor still running. So again, the problem that I've been having with this Furrion 16 cubic foot refrigerator is that the freezer stays consistently cold and the refrigerator just doesn't. Temperature will get up to low 50s, and then all of a sudden it'll drop down to 32 degrees. So again, we're set at 32 and minus 10. Freezer's cooling, as you can see. Refrigerator, really not any kind of cooling going on. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this sit for a couple of hours, come back, and we'll see what that refrigerator looks like. All right, so it's the next day, about 14 hours after I first turned this thing on, after disassembling it. So I just want to check to see what kind of temperatures we have. So my freezer is very cold. Looks like 14 or 15 below zero, which should actually be -2. And my refrigerator temperature is sitting, looks like right about 38 or 39. And that looks about right. So you can see I still have my doors cheated and no air coming from the fan, and that little door is closed, which makes perfect sense because temperature in my refrigerator is right where it should be. And of course on the freezer side, well, that fan was still blowing. I didn't have this side cheated, so as soon as I opened it, that fan turned off. So it appears like I'm actually overcooling on the freezer side to keep the refrigerator. So yeah, that fan is back on blowing again, which, yeah, my freezer's plenty cold right now. Let's go walk around the back, take a look at, so yeah, I'm at 1.8, 1.9 amps, and my compressor is not running. So I'm going to do one last check, again with my door cheated. You can see temperature in the refrigerator is starting to come up just because I had it open. So I want to see at what temperature this little gate opens. So I'm getting a lot of cold air, which tells me that fan is still running. And you can see the refrigerator temperature is slowly climbing. And just to try and make sure that this is as accurate as I can get it, this is the thermostat in the refrigerator, and so I put my thermometer right next to that so that they should be pretty much the same. So again, we're gonna let this thing warm up. And we're going to see when this door opens. and right there the door opened and we are at almost 46 degrees. So yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm gonna go ahead and put this back in. So I do want to show you this. There is a little vent down here that comes from where these cooling coils are on the freezer side. So there's always a little bit of cold air, not blowing, but just cold air that's creeping in from the freezer side. So it appears to me like this refrigerator, if you leave the doors closed, is staying at a relatively consistent temperature because of the air coming through that vent. But as soon as you add food that's not completely cold, or you open and close this door a couple times, yeah, I think that this refrigerator temperature is getting way too high. So for that fan to start blowing in the refrigerator at about 45 or 46 degrees, and then it's still going to take time, the food in this refrigerator is not going to last very long. All right, so that is my Furrion 16 cubic foot side by side 12 volt refrigerator.